Sir Winston Churchill said it best. We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. So when it comes to giving the gift of life, egg sharing is an amazing vehicle to make that possible. But what exactly is IVF egg sharing? Well, stick around and I'll explain it. Hello, I'm Corlandos Scott, a third-party reproduction attorney in Los Angeles, and that simply means that I help people who are growing their families with the help of a third party, like an egg donor. In today's episode, we're going to talk about what is egg sharing. We'll look at some egg sharing pros and cons, and of course, I'll address some legal and ethical considerations of egg sharing. Let's dive in. I like to think of egg sharing as really hope sharing, because the entire reason women donate eggs is to help fulfill the hope that another person can become a parent. So in simple terms, IVF egg sharing is when two or more parties agree to share eggs collected from a patient who's undergoing the IVF process of an egg retrieval. So AKA an egg donor. Now, these are general numbers, but on average, an egg donor will produce around 21 eggs in a single retrieval cycle. Now, that's more than enough to share with more than one set of intended parents. Take, for instance, let's say that 60% of the fertilized eggs produce good quality embryos. Well, that means that most intended parents would get 12 or 13 viable embryos. Well, many intended parents only go through 1 to 2 transfer attempts, especially if they're successful their first time or two around. Then, most times, the remaining embryos are then frozen or destroyed. So doing an egg sharing cycle makes sense for so many reasons. Let's look at a couple. First, an egg sharing cycle reduces the chance that viable embryos will be wasted by remaining frozen indefinitely or even destroyed. Those eggs could have been used by another couple to make embryos that would have helped them grow their family. Second, it reduces the cost of IVF treatment by maybe up to 50%. Maybe you can split it down the middle in half. Instead of one couple paying the donor fee and agency fee, there are two couples who are splitting the eggs and consequently splitting the fees. Also, some IVF clinics will work to split the cost of medical procedures for intended parents who are sharing an egg donation cycle. After all, the doctor is only doing one retrieval procedure, so the parents should split the cost of that as well. And third, shared cycles help more people become parents. Enough said for me. So if you're curious about it, you may want to check with your IVF clinic or even the egg donor agency that you're looking at to find out if they're open to having you work with another set of recipients to do a shared egg cycle. Now let's talk about the cons. Honestly, I really can't think of any. I guess some may think it's a con that you don't get as many eggs as you would doing a cycle on your own. But unless you're trying to have a football team-sized family, a shared cycle may just give you all that you need to reach your family building goals. Now, I get it. Not all egg retrievals are the same, and some produce more than others. And so there are people who have gone through an egg donation by themselves and still not gotten enough eggs to satisfy their family building goals. And I understand that. We're talking about, in general, this could be a viable option to help offset some of the costs and put you in a good position. So let's look at some ethical issues. In the IVF procedures for egg sharing, just like any other medical procedures, the same basic principles of ethics apply. You know, things like autonomy, justice, non-maleficence. I like that word. It's fun to say non-maleficence. Anyway, autonomy in our context simply means knowing that the donor has the ultimate right to govern herself, especially if she confronts medical risks during the process. Then there's justice, which for me really applies to the terms of the contract between you and the donor and you and the other parents. More on that in a minute. And then we have non-maleficence, which simply implies that the medical provider should do no harm. In this context, what comes to mind for me is that the doctor should treat this like any other normal donation cycle and not try to increase the medicine regimen in an effort to pump up the egg count at the risk of injuring the donor and causing her to hyperstimulate. Now, I'm not as concerned with that because I truly believe that an upstanding doctor wouldn't dare do that. But when we're talking about non-maleficence, I also believe that the parents have a duty with regards to non-maleficence. Okay, maybe one or two more times, but I love it. Anyway, the parents are going to be signing an agreement. You're going to sign an agreement that says you're going to honor the rights of the donor with regards to privacy. You're also going to be agreeing to compensate the donor. In most cases, you're going to also be making other promises like confidentiality and things like that. So you're keeping your promises in the contract, for me, is a form of non-maleficence in the sense that you're not doing harm to the donor because you're keeping your promises. Of course, there's also some legal implications. But before I lay them out for you, tell YouTube that you like this video by just smashing that like button. That way YouTube shares it with some more people, and then everybody knows about shared egg cycles. Go ahead. It'll be your good deed for the day. And, wait. While you're down there, subscribe too. Subscribe. Because if you subscribe, then you won't miss any of my newly released videos, because nobody likes being left out and missing videos, right? So what should you be looking for on the legal side of things? Well, my friend, buckle your seatbelt. I'm just going to fly through a few things for you to consider when structuring the legal side of your shared egg donation cycle. Well, you should definitely think about the compensation given to the donor. I've had some donors request double the compensation because they were donating to two different couples. But that's not the norm, So consider, what are you compensating, or how are you compensating your donor? Typically, the answer is that a donor is not going to get higher compensation because it's a shared cycle. After all, she's not undergoing or undertaking any more risk than she would be if she were working with one set of parents. She's not doing any more retrieval procedures than she would be if she were working with one set of parents. So just keep that in mind and remember to ask these questions when you're matching with the donor. You should also be very clear on how you and the other recipient or recipients will split the costs. I'm going to slow down right here because I realize that I take a different approach from some lawyers in my field. Because with some lawyers, they simply say, just do one big contract with all the parents on it and the donor on it, and maybe even the egg donation agency on it as well. I'm a little more careful than that. I say no way, no way. I honestly think we should have 3 contracts. Yes, I said it. At least 3 contracts if we're considering you as a recipient, one other set of recipients, and the donor. Here's how that would work. I believe that there should be a contract between the donor and recipient 1, and another contract between the donor and recipient 2, and then there should be a third contract between the 2 recipients. And here's why. Each of the recipient parties is making guarantees to the donor, right? So each should outline those rights and responsibilities in their own contract with that donor. But also, there are a number of considerations between the 2 recipient parties, like how many eggs will each of you get? If they say they're splitting the eggs evenly, right? Everyone's going to get the same number of eggs. Well, what if there are an odd number of eggs retrieved? Who gets the extra egg? Which eggs will each party get? That's something that's super important to think about. All eggs aren't necessarily created equally. Some come out and they're viable and able to be fertilized, and some aren't. You don't want to split the number of eggs, but then you have one party to get all of the good eggs, so to speak. So there are a number of legal issues that exist between the recipients alone. Like, what happens if one set of recipients backs out in the middle of the process? Does that leave you high and dry to cover all the costs by yourself? So please make sure you consider having separate contracts between you and the other recipient, and you and the donor separately from the other recipient and the donor. Also, you want to address the normal egg donation issues like the donor rights and responsibilities and the intended parent's rights and responsibilities. Things like confidentiality, anonymity if you're proceeding anonymously. And of course, you want to make sure parental rights are very clear and the egg donor knows that she has no rights, but she also won't be stuck with any responsibilities. At the end of the day, opting for a shared cycle is a great way to save some money in the egg donation process, but please do not skimp on your attorney. I know it sounds self-serving as an attorney, but make sure you have an attorney draft or review the contracts before signing. Why do I say that? You don't want to end up being the one who gets all the bad eggs, right? Well, if you need help sorting through it, do not hesitate to reach out to me. You can click the link below in the description and start a chat directly with me. I can't wait to chat with you, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.